Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the WOW History Channel. My name is Ron Guth, and each week I discuss a little piece of history that hopefully will make you say, wow, I never knew that, or wow, I never learned that in school. One of the worst decisions ever handed down by the Supreme Court of the United States was the Dred Scott v. Sanford decision of 1857. Dred Scott was a black slave born in Missouri in America who sued for his and his family's freedom, ran it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and lost. Not only did he lose, but he was told that neither he nor any person of African ancestry could ever be an American citizen. The Dred Scott decision has been parsed and picked apart and analyzed in about a million different ways. For lawyers, it is one of those landmark cases that every law student must learn and memorize. For abolitionists, it was a call to arms. For slave owners, it cemented slavery as an institution of American life. Americans were split down the middle and eventually fought against each other in the Civil War. You can find lots of videos about the Dred Scott decision on YouTube, but not much information about the man himself. Who was Dred Scott, and why was his case so important that it rose to the U.S. Supreme Court? Dred Scott started life circa 1799. The exact date of his birth is unknown, nor are the names of his parents, but this is typical of the record keeping for slaves at that time. The owner of his family was Peter Blow, the first of several of Dred's owners. As a slave, Dred was considered property, and he had absolutely no legal rights in America. In 1818, when Dred was around 19 years old, Peter Blow, his family, and 5 other slaves moved to Alabama. After a dozen years there, where they failed at farming, the Blow clan moved to St. Louis, Missouri, which at that time was a slave state. Peter Blow died in 1832, and either just before his death or as part of his estate, Dred Scott was sold to Dr. John Emerson, a U.S. Army surgeon. Apparently, Emerson was not a nice guy, as Dred attempted to run away, but he was eventually captured and returned. So at that point, Dred was still in Missouri. Because of his position in the Army, Dr. Emerson moved around the country quite a bit. In 1836, Emerson moved to Fort Armstrong, Illinois. Now Dred was in a free state, but was still kept as a slave, even though the law said that once a slave became a resident of a free state, they were considered emancipated. The next year, Emerson moved to Fort Snelling, which was in the territory of Wisconsin, which was also a free territory, but Dred was still kept as a slave by Dr. Emerson. There, Dred met and married a slave named Harriet Robinson. Harriet's owner was a justice of the peace who was kind enough to perform their marriage, but then he promptly signed her over to Dr. Emerson so that the couple could remain together, albeit as slaves. So now Dred and his wife were in Wisconsin territory. Later in 1837, Dr. Emerson moved to Jefferson Barracks in Missouri, but he left Dred and Harriet behind in the Wisconsin territory, where they were hired out as slaves. By 1838, Emerson was in Fort Jessup in Louisiana, which was definitely a slave state, where he met and married Eliza Irene Sanford. Now, if that name sounds familiar, that's the Sanford of Dred Scott v. Sanford. The Emersons called for the Scotts to join them in Louisiana, come down from Wisconsin. On their trip south, Harriet gave birth to a baby girl who, because she was born in free territory, was considered free. So now we have Dred and Harriet, who were both slaves, with a daughter who was free. Ironically, they named their daughter Eliza after Dr. Emerson's wife, but that curried little favor with the Emersons, as we shall soon see. In 1840, the Emerson clan moved to Missouri, which was still a slave state. After Dr. Emerson's death in 1843, the Scotts became Eliza's property, who continued to hire out the Scotts as slaves. In 1846, Dred went to the widow and asked her if he could buy freedom for himself and his family, and he actually offered quite a bit of money, hundreds of dollars, but she refused. So tired of the situation, and with a little legal help, Dred sued for his freedom. In his first court case, Scott was deemed a free slave because of his prior residence in Illinois and the Wisconsin Territory, as we discussed earlier. However, in 1852, on appeal, that decision was reversed by the Missouri Supreme Court that said Dred was still a slave. Dred's situation was complicated further when Eliza Emerson, now Eliza Chaffee, remarried as Eliza Chaffee, supposedly transferred ownership of the Scotts to her brother, John Sanford, who lived all the way in New York. Now, did Eliza do this on purpose, just to throw a wrench into the legal works? In 1854, Dred brought a new suit against John Sanford, but was again found to be a slave. And that's when the case went to the U.S. Supreme Court, where Scott was told after the decision that he would always be a slave and could never attain American citizenship. Remember Peter Blow, Dred's first owner? In a wild coincidence, Peter's adult children paid the legal fees for his state cases because they were abolitionists. After the Dred Scott v. Sanford decision, Eliza Emerson / Chaffee transferred the Scott family to Henry Taylor Blow, Peter's son, who freed them finally on May 26, 1847, more than 10 years after Dred brought his first suit. Though he was a free man, Dred was never able to vote or become an American citizen. Dred Scott unfortunately did not enjoy his freedom for very long because he died of tuberculosis just over a year later. Unfortunately, Dred Scott could not find justice in the American court system, but he did find it finally in the kindness of his last owners. Now, there's a little discussed reason that the U.S. Supreme Court denied Scott his freedom, and I'll look into that in a future video. It has to do with the makeup of the court. So thank you for joining me for this episode. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. If you like my videos, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, it's simple, it's easy, and it helps me move up in YouTube's algorithm. I'll see you next week for another episode of the Wow History Channel. In the meantime, have a great week and goodbye.